Okay, the recording is going.
Sync.
Sync. Okay. Thank you for participating in this study. Today we'll discuss the adoption of modern and alternative teaching methods, such as gamification, spaced repetition, methods of loci, and associative learning in educational settings. Your insights are invaluable to understanding the challenges and opportunities in implementing these methods. There are no right or wrong answers, so please feel free. Feel comfortable sharing your thoughts and experiences.
Okay.
So I'm going to start off with having you say your name and your age.
Okay. My name is Matthew Mortensen. I am 25 years old.
Perfect. First question is just, could you please share your role in education and your experience with innovative teaching methods?
Yes, so I'm currently going to the University of North Dakota. I'm actually an education major, specifically within aviation, along with a little bit of history as well. Mm-hmm. So I feel that I have a good amount of insight into teaching. I do have about a cumulative 45, 50 teaching hours through here at the university and through other places I have been at. And what I have from different alternative teaching methods was I found that putting them in along with regular styles of teaching, such as lecture, such as group work and group activities, that if you put in these alternate teaching styles where you can have a Kahoot, you can have some kind of game involved, or you can have something where there's a little bit of independent study, whether that is done in class for a certain amount of time or that's done outside of class. I find that the students tend to look over the material more now that they can do it at their own pace, where it's not dead set on, we must get everything done for this entire week and then we're just going to move on to something else, where they get the chance to actually not only look over the material the way they want to, but also with things such as games, Kahoots, things like that, Jeopardies even, that students will identify their teaching and what they're learning with something fun and exciting for them. And so that'll also get them to understand the material better and to memorize it better.
Expanding a little bit on that, in your opinion, what are the key characteristics that define effective teaching and learning in today's educational landscape?
I think a big thing is just understanding that these students are not the same as students from 20, 30 years ago. That these are students who understand technology usually far better than any current professor that we have, and where older professors have a hard time with this and trying to understand and trying to incorporate technology. I think this is something where newer teachers are better at, where they are able to understand technology and kind of understand what these new students are dealing with. And so I think it's important just to understand they probably know technology more than you. They understand it more. And so being able to actually implement that into the classroom, I feel for some of them is actually kind of a breath of fresh air, that it's something that they're used to. So I think that is something that a lot of teachers and professors overlook, is that this is what they have grown up with, and they usually know it more and better than you.
A little more on your background. What is your, I know you already touched on it a little bit, but what is your familiarity with modern teaching methods such as gamification, spaced repetition, methods of loci, and associative learning?
So these are newer things that I've done kind of later in my education, later in my teaching, where in the beginning of all of my experiences, it was very much this is lectures, these are PowerPoints, these are the very basic aspects of teaching. Where later in my teaching, and actually more into my teaching hours that I did, that I started implementing these just as test runs, just to see how the students would react, and even my professors and mentors and how they kind of perceived it and saw it. Most were actually fairly receptive to it, both students and professors, and kind of realized that this is a way just to get more interaction from the students. And so my experience has been mostly positive. with students and with most of my professors and mentors about this. There's still some that don't like it, that don't want it, because that's just something that they're not used to or used to experiencing. But overall, my experience with it has been fairly positive. Still very recent, but still fairly positive.
Could you describe any experience you had with these or similar methods of the ones that I mentioned earlier? To repeat them, it's gamification, spaced repetition, methods of loci, and associative learning.
So definitely for gamification, for sure, I've made my own Kahoots. I've made my own Jeopardy games. I've made all sorts of different stuff for my students here at the University of North Dakota. And my experience has always been they've been very receptive to it. And especially when I make it a little competitive for them, and I put them in groups instead of just all free for all, put them in small groups and they have to work together. So they're doing group work, working together, having to think for themselves, but also think as a group. I've always found that they've been very engaged because I think it's just very natural for people to be competitive in that sense, especially if I say that they get a prize of a candy bar usually, or just some other small prize. They tend to very much be interested. And when I ask them towards the end of we have an exam or we have something else at the end, they tend to say that what we went over in the game is what they tend to remember the most. So very clearly there is a good correlation between trying to get the students to do something fun and exciting with they remember it for what they actually need to use for the test.
Since you have implemented gamification like Kahoot, what was it that first motivated you to adopt gamification and then Kahoot, and what challenges did you face?
I usually did it just because it was something that was very rare in any of my teaching through, or any of my experience as a student. And so it's just something that'd be kind of fun and kind of different, especially where if you were a student just sitting there for your entire semester of just lectures and PowerPoints and that's it. It's very, very boring, drags on. So just doing something that's a little bit different and interesting. My first challenge was just how to implement it properly, because it's kind of hard to just throw one in for no reason. So I had to understand what we were teaching, what I wanted the students to learn out of my teaching, and then implement that into the games that I made for them.
Right. In your view, what do you think are the main barriers to the wider adoption of innovative or alternative teaching techniques in educational settings now?
I think it's just entirely generational. I think it just depends on the kind of teachers that you have, where newer teachers are more open to using technology in the classroom versus older teachers that never had that growing up, never have experienced it or used it. So they are reluctant to try something that they have no experience with. So I think that's one of the biggest ones. Also just because school and academia usually tends to be a bit older anyway in how they do things. So I know that over time that will be more adopted because it is working and it is helping the students learn. So I think over time, as more new teachers are coming in and older teachers are retiring, I do think that this will be more widespread and accepted.
How does resource limitations, institutional culture, or educator readiness play a role?
Well, you have to have technology to use the technology. So for some schools, they just don't either have the funding or they just don't have the resources to gain this new technology or to be able to apply this technology to their teaching. And then absolutely whatever the culture is at whatever school you're going to, whether if they're much more traditional, you're probably not going to see the new technology in the classrooms versus newer schools or schools that are trying to change and adapt, you'll be able to see it more often. So it just entirely depends on what the school is doing and where they're located and if they have the resources available.
Right. How do you perceive the potential impact of modern teaching or alternative teaching methods on student engagement and learning outcomes?
I think that's the best way to ensure that we still get that engagement, especially with today where we have more social media and more stimulation for really children more than ever in our entire history. So we have to adapt and we have to change that, because just playing a video on a TV now is fun. Having a Bill Nye episode is fun, but it's not enough anymore. And so I think using these new styles and applying more technology will help them retain more and will be better overall for the future of education.
Do you believe these methods could also address diverse learning needs and styles more effectively than traditional approaches?
Oh, absolutely. Especially with how we saw with COVID, where if we are unable to attend these classes in person, whether it's because of COVID or just an individual who cannot get to classes, who cannot be there for just traditional lectures, we have shown that technology has been able to help in every possible way with getting as much people to learn as much information as possible and in a fairly efficient manner as well.
What are the common attitudes among your colleagues towards adopting new teaching methods? Is there a general openness, skepticism, or are the perspectives varied?
I would say my colleagues are very open about the idea. To what degree is debated upon, whether it should be a very limited resource and this should only be implemented very sparingly versus others that think this should be much more widespread and popular. But overall, I feel that my peers are very open to the idea of more technology in the learning environment and in schools.
What kind of support and resources do you believe are necessary to facilitate the adoption of modern or alternative teaching methods?
I think just the physical technology itself, you need to be able to sustain it, you need to be able to have it. You need to have the funding to continue this, but I think more importantly, you just need the culture around it. If you go to a university or a school that doesn't want anything to do with this extra technology, it's not going to matter if you have the resources or not. So it all depends on if the school is willing to have this new technology and to apply it and try it out. And then, of course, actually if they're able to use it and actually have the physical technology itself.
Can you share any examples of successful integration of innovative teaching methods within your institution, or other that you're aware of, besides the ones that you implemented yourself?
Yeah, so I've had other professors who have attempted to do gamification, who have attempted to try to let us as students go off and do our independent learning. And I think that overall, it just helps more students who might be just very bad at sitting down and just straight listening to a lecture for hours on end. And so this, I think, allows more students to engage with the material and overall have more students actually learn what it is that the professors or teachers are actually trying to teach their students. So I think overall, the level of all the students increases on what they actually know and what the professors and teachers actually want them to know for their tests or for the subject that they're teaching.
What factors do you think contributed to their success?
I think that it's just expanding more upon just different teaching styles, but also different ways that students learn, different learning perspectives, where some students are very good at receiving the information directly and then just applying it. And that's been old school teaching, old school academia for years, forever. But I think more and more now we're understanding that this only benefits a certain group of students and where everybody else is just kind of left behind. But now with more technology, we're actually able to see more students understand the material, be able to memorize the material, and actually be able to apply the material, which I think is the most important part. Anybody can memorize something, but actually learning it and then actually applying the information, I think we're seeing more of that because we're expanding with technology.
Looking forward, what steps do you think need to be taken to overcome the barriers to adopting more modern teaching methods or alternative teaching methods in education?
I think overall it's just a cultural thing where it's all about not even believing that this needs to be implemented into every single facet of every single teacher, of every single department or even area of teaching, but just the openness to try, I think is the biggest barrier. That once you begin to try and experiment with technology, that will actually allow it to kind of go whichever way it goes and allow certain teachers to use it how they see fit, and whatever works will work and whatever doesn't we will not do again. So I think just the openness to try is the biggest barrier.
Is there anything else you'd like to share regarding your experiences, hopes, or concerns related to the use of modern or alternative teaching methods?
I just hope that the older I get and the more teaching I do, that I will begin to see more of it being implemented, and to whatever variety or degree it goes will be up to the individual teacher. But what I actually hope overall is that just more students learn.
Um, on that note, thank you for sharing your insight. Your input is crucial for understanding the complexities of adopting modern or alternative teaching methods and will contribute significantly to our research. So, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.